Hello and welcome back to Poor Man's Electronics Bench. Part 2 of this episode will take a few tangents in order to fix some of the sins of what has happened to these enclosures over the years. I will address some of the cosmetics of the degraded foam damping that was on the original HFDs, tweeters, and go about removing the Velcro pads that previous owners installed in an attempt to secure the failing foam grill covers which are now in a landfill somewhere. Along with that, I am going to cover my attempts to defunkify whatever smell and moisture was added to the enclosures by someone's addition of rags moistened with an unknown and bad-smelling fluid. For a little bonus, a quick look at the new LFDs, which arrived today, will show that modifications will be needed to the bolt mounting circle, and a short mention of plans to add and tie in interior bracing between the cabinet's back and side walls, to hopefully quell some potential cabinet resonances or change the frequency and amplitude of them. If you are interested in any of this content, please stay tuned and enjoy. Hello and welcome to part 2 of this episode of this old speaker rehab. I am continuing along with the work on the new to me AR11s and starting to try to pretty some things up from the original time period of what's happened to the speaker where things have all degraded and gone messy. One of the things I can do is the high frequency driver, known as a tweeter, had a large amount of crusty adhesive stuff on it because at one time it had some sort of sound dampening material to it, probably a foam that was stuck to it with an adhesive, and the only thing that was really left was a little bit of black powder that I scraped off of the adhesive and the adhesive membrane itself with a backing where I had to pry that off the tweeter. I'll go over how I did that on the other speaker. I decided to do a practice one first off camera. I'll give you a little view of my efforts after the cleaning. Comes out fairly well, and my cleaner of choice was a low odor mineral spirits. I found that it was good at dissolving the glue over time, and I've probably got some residue on here I can clean up a little more. I found that it's a good low volatile, low odor, high flash point fluid to clean up this particular adhesive, and it'll probably work on a lot of other situations. This is another membrane that is put over some of the front of the housing of the tweeter, and it seems that it's glued along the edge. When I was prying up that other membrane that was on top of it that used to have the foam on it, I ended up pulling up a little bit of it, but I stuck it back down. It seems to be wanting to go back into place. But I found that putting a good coat of this mineral spirits, which it's basically a turpentine mixture with some other chemicals, mild chemicals though, and this particular stuff is what's advertised as a low odor brand, and I can kind of attest to that because the smell really isn't bothering me. But just putting an even coating on here with some sort of a swab or a Q-tip. The trick is you have to let it sit for about a minute. That's where it really does the work, because it won't evaporate readily, since it probably has a flash point pretty similar to kerosene. But what it does is it really does a good job of softening the glue up that is on the front of the front of these things. And I was going along with some cut pieces of some disposable shop rag. And it really does a nice job of taking off any of the glue. So once we get down to this point, I'll give you a better demo of doing this from scratch on the other speaker. Some of it might time lapse into a faster sequence because it takes a little while to get that adhesive backing membrane right off of here, but I'm kind of pleased with using this particular solvent to clean the glue off of with. I oftentimes use the old trick of using WD-40 to take adhesives off, but I think this might even be a little better concoction. And then on the driver itself, it has terminals that go through the backside from the diaphragm. You can probably see the small copper wires on either side that are soldered and extended to some larger gauges that go to here, through here, and then to the connections on the back. So I've gotten that far in this one, and I also went through and started taking off some of these Velcro squares, and I took off a staple that was probably one of the original Velcro circles. These staples are really a little bare. They're these little, they look like they're copper, or copper plated at least. But they are stuck in there. I had to really grab a pair of these with a pair of needle nose pliers to get that one out, and I'd like to take all the Velcro off the front here to see what my options are going to be when I go to reattach things. And there's so much of it on both speakers and different versions of. I have some aftermarket stuff. I have the original stuff. I have some bigger round spots of more aftermarket stuff. So I'm going to be a little busy just doing little general tidy up, clean up, but I'm going to show you the process I used for cleaning up that same high frequency driver on the other cabinet. It's just that I'll probably do it in a time lapse sequence with a clock on it so you can see how long it actually takes. So I shall be back in a little bit. I am situated to start working on the drivers in enclosure serial number 03. And in this case I've chosen a few weapons, some of them homemade. I made up a couple of scrapers. This one was out of an old gift card, and I kind of bevel cut the edge a little bit. I had another piece of plastic I bevel cut the edge on as well to help do a little scraping on things. And I have my bottle of low odor mineral spirits, and I am going to speed up the majority of this video. Because it's kind of boring, but basically I'm going to be describing later, or I'm going to be removing some of this foam. I'm going to be taking this adhesive membrane off and then cleaning up the adhesive underneath it on the back facing side. This was, I guess, a double-sided adhesive. One side had the foam ring covering the front of this, and then the other side stuck it to the excuse me, stuck it to the tweeter. So I'm going to be working on all that, and a paintbrush to brush off the dome of the driver will come into play, as well as maybe a vacuum cleaner. So you'll see some of that, but I'm going to start the clock, and hopefully I can get this done in 20 minutes or less. And that was 20 minutes worth of work, condensed, give or take. I had a little playtime involved here and managed to get things cleaned up fairly well. I might give it one more wipe down the other an hour before reinstalling it, but that's the gist of taking your time and cleaning things up. There's still some glue residue here and there. Then maybe see if I can get another shot at some of this. It's almost like it's a different type of glue that the mineral spirits don't have an effect on, or I just didn't leave it on there long enough. But on this particular glue, the mineral spirits do work well. It takes about 30 seconds to a minute before it starts dissolving the glue, and then after that point it's just a matter of wiping it off. It comes off fairly easily. That membrane, like I said, it was just an adhesive, double-sided adhesive that was there to hold the foam on the one side, and the other side on the foam, and then the other side stuck it to the face of the tweeter. And I might do something similar, probably with some felt. I don't really see the need for foam. Felt would last longer for one, and if anything, I'd probably just use adhesive on the outer plastic ring here on the back of the felt. It's not like the felt is going to make noise vibrating. It should be sufficient to do any damping that might be needed. One thing I chose to do is to, after going this far, is to protect the tweeter. I've got some little plastic cups, and I took the liberty of dreaming up a little scheme to tape them on and cutting the ring of the cup into some places where I can cut it further. And I can cut it a little bit more at each one of those spots. The arts and crafts part of the show, always got to have one. What I was planning to do is to tape this in place over the dome of the tweeter so it can prevent any damage. I'm fairly certain that dome has a aluminum hemispherical shaped bump out to protect the back of it, but I'm not going to guarantee that won't prevent it from being ripped or punctured in any way. I think there's later models of these drivers still available, but I just like to go forward and keep what I have in my possession in good shape from being damaged anymore. So at this point, some packing tape can be used to stick that to the face after I come on. Gotta get all those little guys to squish out properly. Try not to cover the fasteners because I still need to take this thing off. And try to get it centered in place as well. I'm sure there's other people that have had mishaps and tragedies with speakers in various ways, shapes and forms, and usually your best bet's just to get them off your bench in your working area, maybe even inside of a box as soon as possible, and away from anything like a screwdriver that might be attracted to it, or the old dropping it or dropping something on it that might damage it. But in this case, it's going to get well enclosed and contained, but this will give it enough damage where it can't, or enough protection where it can't easily be mauled by anything else. get a little bit. It's nice that these have some T-nuts behind them. Can't say they were very tight. That one pulled up some of the foam seal with it. If you're like anybody else that orders parts, you get plenty of free plastic bags. Oh, and of course, I've got my label maker coming into play again. Going to make up some labels for my positive and negative wires. I might as well do that right now. Label type flag, 1/4 inch diameter and a 0.6 inch length. Enter, print. Just to keep down any confusion of which wire went where. The H is for high frequency, and a plus instead of a minus. My only gripe about these label makers is they get fussy sometimes. There's a little contact switch with the cutter that may or may not recognize you having actually cut the label properly, and then it'll come up with an error, and you'll have to hit the print again and waste a little more labeling. Well, I could just push up from the bottom, but let's see if we can pop it up from the top here. There we go. Didn't hurt anything. This has a plus on the right side, so the yellow wire is the plus. Our gasket got kind of ruined. We have to come up with some more gasket material. So this is our high frequency plus. I got stuff stuck to my hand that I don't want stuck to my hand there. This will eliminate any doubt of what the heck did I do and what goes to what when you go to reconnect things. You may or may not consider putting new connectors on the ends of these wires. They're crimped down with a Molex style fold everything over crimp, and they're done fairly well, but I might do some sort of test on resistive properties between something that's just crimped like this and crimped and soldered. But in the meantime, we know what side our positive was, so I'm going to take and put a little positive sticker on the back side. So I don't continually have to keep flopping it over to see which side was positive. And this particular speaker serial number is the 03. So we're going to give it an 03 sticker. This looks like it had a part number sticker on it that came off. It probably was floating around somewhere in the cabinet, or it ended up in all the little pieces of loose fiberglass that I pulled out. So here's our driver. A broken gasket that I might have to look into getting some sort of material to replace. So what the rest of the piece isn't in here, it's kind of weird. Can't quite explain that one. And I have some bubble wrap to put around it. Hopefully it won't sit in limbo for too long. This is a few days after I made the first video, and I have already ordered my low frequency drivers. So I just have to wait for arrival, and then if you're a connoisseur of fine processed meats like I am, you end up with a bunch of plastic tubs available to store things in with nice lids. And this baby fits right in there, no problem, for the last added part of protection. And then of course we have to label that one too, so we know which is which. I'm going to go over measuring impedance and resistance on DC resistance on these. Take them over to my desk where there's more access for things, for other equipment. And the mid-range driver, mid-frequency driver isn't as bad. The only difference is it has 4 screws, so we have to put and it's got Phillips instead of a hex drive, so we'll go with a Phillips bit. Swing the camera over to this one. These screws are very loose. They were probably, looks like they were never even accessed before. So some of this is kind of good then. It's not had a lot of people monkeying around with it. Put the hardware in a proper bag where it belongs. And try to plop this one out. Well, this one I can reach over and push out easier. It's not stuck in any way, shape, or form, thankfully. This one has what seems to be an intact gasket. It has a positive mark where my thumb is over here. The red wire on it. So that's what we're going to go with. The other speaker had a lot of kind of like a oxidation corrosion on the magnet. I ended up wiping down. This one isn't bad, so I'm not sure exactly what all of that is about. This one's got a shard of probably what used to be a piece of that replacement woofer. Might be. And then this speaker is going to get a positive on its back side as well, which is this side. And then O3. And then it will get set aside until they need to be reinstalled. Let's see the top on this guy. That's the positive. This is the top. So I'll put an O3 up here. Nope, that's a plus. And besides the flag labels on the leads for the mid-range, which the red was the positive, that is about it for working on the removal and tidying up of the two drivers. And I will go off to the next part. It'll probably be about all things on the crossover unit. So stay tuned. I bet that some are going to be wondering,
what in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
well, I'll tell you what's going on. I'm trying to make my best attempt to get that funkified smell out of the inside of these speaker cabinets, along with any moisture that was left over. And I'm trying two combined methods. One of which is I currently have a 100 watt loose bulb on a clip-in fixture inside the speaker to provide some warmth and desiccation. And I'm monitoring the temperature with a probe on the fluke here, trying to make sure it doesn't overheat at 114 degrees, which is a moderate temperature. It's maybe about 35 Celsius or so. I did at first have this speaker lying face down without the covering on it, and I had a 60 watt bulb in there which brought the interior temperature up to about 95 degrees, which I kept overnight. And then what I decided to do is something kind of weird, and not everybody is going to be able to do easily, and also realizing this is an odd occurrence since these speakers are treated this way. I have no idea what happened, where maybe the owner that had the failed foam surrounds on the woofers thought it was good to put a rag moistened with some kind of voodoo juice to get rid of a gypsy curse or something out of the speaker, and put those rags inside of the speaker, causing just creating a situation that really didn't need to occur. And like I said, I tried to dry the cabinet out overnight. It raised the temperature, but that also did not allow for any air circulation. So when I did turn it up on end, I could tell it was warm and a little bit humid inside there. So I've got another device I bought not too long ago. Well, it was about a couple years ago. It was maybe at the beginning of the COVID scare, where you thought you had to sterilize everything. It is an ozone generator. This is a made in Chinese thing, and there was plenty of these on the market offered on eBay, Amazon, whatever. It was less than $100, I believe. And I will tell you, these things actually generate quite a large amount of ozone. I'm going to turn this thing on for just a minute. And it turns on, circulates, and I don't know how familiar you are with ozone. I can smell that immediately. And ozone is a very particular gas where it's basically energized oxygen, and it has so much extra energy in it that it will not stay stable for long. What the properties is it will really tear apart biological molecules, molds, bacterias, and you can't even breathe it in for long. It's an irritant to your mucous membranes, lungs, and it's something that is definitely a health hazard. The one property about it is it doesn't stay in the state of an ozone molecule for long. It ends up having so much energy that it breaks down and back into oxygen fairly quickly, and so much so that it can't even be generated and stored inside of a pressurized cylinder. It'll just, no matter what you do to it, it just wants to revert back to regular oxygen. So it's got to be generated and used immediately. And I had the enclosure face down with this guy running in it for about 2 hours in a fan ventilated room, so it trapped most of the ozone inside the enclosure. And it seemed to do the work of getting rid of the smell. The problem is there's still some humidity in here, so what I'm trying to do now is to leave that light bulb in there, and I have a ventilation crack on the top and the bottom. So in this case, it's pulling in some air, raising the temperature, drying out the humidity. And I'm going to probably have to leave each enclosure like this for about 2 days in order to make sure it's dried out and defunkified to the best of its ability. The only downside of using the ozone is it will attack plastics and rubbers as well. I'm hoping that long-term, it's more of a long-term exposure. The short-term exposure that I gave it hopefully won't have an effect on the insulation properties or permeated the capacitors in any way. So I'm going to just hope for that. I'm thinking, since I heated things up and kind of opened the pores up to the plywood and the MDF, that it helped to reduce the amount of things that could get trapped in there over time. And since it was only about a 2-hour exposure, it was a fairly short exposure to the wires and the capacitors. The heat, like I said, it's 113 degrees Fahrenheit, so it only boils down to about 35 Celsius. The capacitors shouldn't be damaged or affected in much of a way by that temperature. And then I have some other good news. I ordered these Thursday, I believe, and today is Saturday, and I received my new replacement woofers. And the one thing about them so far that I've been surprised on, that they weren't to specification, is the size of the basket. It was listed at 12 1/8, and oh boy, tape measure got out of the way there. Anyways, it's more of a 12 3/16 to 12 and almost a quarter measurement across. So they are a little larger. Remounting them and modifying the enclosure mounting will require me enlarging the inset in the face of the cabinet a little bit. And I'm also noticing that although the screw pattern is very similar, the bolt circle is probably a little, well, let's see, we got one, that one there lines up, and the bolt circle is probably a little larger on these than advertised. They probably should have been like an 11.75 bolt circle. So I might have to go through the work of patching up removing the T-nuts, patching up each one of these holes, probably using some epoxy-based wood filler, and then putting some sort of backing, maybe like a piece of 1/4-inch plywood on the inside of this, just to reinforce everything again. And then re-drilling the holes to a proper bolt diameter. That might seem to be my best effort along things I need to do to remount this. And one item I would also like to look into is the bracing on the cabinet. Now this one brace here, I am thinking about removing that one somehow. I'm probably going to have to cut it with some sort of implement, not sure what. Get it out of the back. I don't want to try to rip and tug at it too much and damage the interior of the cabinet. But then I'd like to replace this with a brace that would go from cabinet wall to cabinet wall, and then would have a taper up from the center where it wouldn't disturb the magnet up to a good portion of the side wall. So that would help brace the sides of the cabinet, which have no type of support or resonance damping along their whole edge. At least that would break that up into smaller half panels, and would also tie it to the back. So that would give a little bit more bracing for any transient resonances that may occur by the cabinet. And there's got to be something, because if you tap on it, it makes a noise. It's a little more prominent when sitting up. Maybe I'm gonna probably go through it with a my other phone has kind of like a spectrum analyzer thing on it. And I should keep it in landscape format here. But that's my plans. I'm going to have a little work to do. I'm going to let this one cabinet dry out, do its thing for a couple days, and then I'm going to give the cabinet that I just showed you the same treatment of it drying out. So that's my plans for going forward, and we'll move on to the next part of things. I thought I would turn out a quick part 2 here just to show you my progress so far and discuss my plans for going forward. On part 3, I am going to try to do testing on the new drivers for the low frequencies, my mid-range and high frequency drivers, and the crossover components using the Dayton Audio DATS testing system on my laptop. So if you would be interested in that content, please feel free to return. If you like what you see, please give me a thumbs up, and if you would like to be notified of new content, please feel free to subscribe. And I hope you are doing well and can return soon for my next part of this episode of restoring the AR11 speakers. Thank you. This content is available on YouTube and Odyssey.com. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. Hope you return soon.